All right, welcome everybody. We're going to get this thing rolling right away with the Second Amendment tonight on Guns in the 701, episode 91. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And welcome everybody. How we doing?
Great.
So we got a full slate here, guys. We got 6 people on with us tonight. The guys from Here's a Deal are joining in with us. Shiloh, Marvin, good to see you tonight. Of course,
Nice seeing you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my co-pilot Mike is from Mitchell, and Ben Koppleman, representative for the which district is that, Ben?
16
in the North Dakota legislature. Great guy, and we worked even on some legislation. I know through Magram mostly on the Stand Your Ground. I know that that was an interesting one last session. And we're joined by Mr. Derrick Sherwood. I do pronounce that right?
Yes. Yeah, I know we've had some issues with what the actual name is, but I think we finally figured it out. So
we got it figured out. I'm sure that was just miscommunication on my part. So welcome to everybody. So we're going to get this started. I'm going to kind of let David go, kind of tell his story, and let Ben jump in there because I know that this is going to affect possibly some future legislation, and I think we're probably all going to try to be involved in that. I'm guessing Shiloh will as well. Because the session ain't that far away. I know 2025 seems a long way, but it's not. So, all right, guys, I'll let you guys start out. David, go ahead.
All right. So, for
not David, Derrick. See,
I get it. You can call me anything you want. Just don't call me late to dinner. Okay, that's
Derrick
really where I'm standing here today. So my story begins back in May of 2022 when I was falsely accused of domestic violence, and I had a protection order that was put on me. Basically under these false pretenses and then within that first order, my guns were confiscated by a judge. They were that was part of the initial order. Fast forward to December 22, we challenged the order again. At that point, we got my kids taken off the order, and then really where the big focus came in is after my divorce, we filed another petition because in the divorce agreement, it was agreed to that the plaintiff in this case would not object to allow me to have my firearms returned. The judge in this case agreed to that. Then I think hey, cool, I'm fine. I don't want to see you anyways. This is no big deal. I go to the Grand Forks County Sheriff, and they tell me I cannot have my guns back because I still have a protection order in place. They specifically cited 18 U.S.C. 922 G8, and that led me to file another action to say, hey, this order is not executable. I proceeded on. I filed, and then they said, nope, you're just not allowed to by law have these. And then the state's attorney also said, for Grand Forks, Haley Wamstad actually also said the same thing. Nope, we're just not going to give them to you. They will not. They are still to this day holding my guns in the Grand Forks County Sheriff, even though I have a court order saying that I'm allowed to have them under North Dakota Century Code 6201. It is allowed to restore my firearm rights, and that's part of the reason why it brought me here today. But I also appealed this, and the North Dakota Supreme Court also said, tough crap. You don't have standing to challenge North Dakota Century Code 140701 4G. And basically I've been without this, even though I've had an agreed order to get my guns back, and they're still sitting in the sheriff's office at this point.
Yeah, that having standing thing, and then you and I talked about that last time we were on the phone, and a guy does run into that. That means, guys, basically you have to be in trouble already.
Correct.
That way you have something charged, you go, and then you have standing in court. Otherwise, they're basically not going to hear it. And that's kind of what the Supreme Court, that was the North Dakota Supreme Court, right, that basically said that?
Correct, yes.
So now we have another issue. And you want to jump in there, Ben, and kind of, do you know anything about what we have in Century Code?
Well, and please let me know if my signal starts to get sketchy. I'll pull off somewhere. But anyhow, I don't really know why this was able to be upheld. I did review the federal rule that he's referring to, and that the Grand Forks Sheriff referred to, and it appears that.
Oh, we lost Ben. And so U.S. Title 18, if everybody's not aware, that's pretty much where every single firearm law exists today in the United States. That's also where your IRS stuff is. Again, ATF agent. All this comes from a lot of times from the Prohibition area. Remember the revenuers? Well, that's what that was about. So everything was written under Title 18, and it's still there. U.S. Code Title 18 is where you're going to find just about every single firearms code. And the one you're referring to, that's what. And I'm with Ben. I'm not quite sure how they applied that or how that sheriff even applied that.
So
now, I don't know anything about your sheriff. I imagine up in that Grand Forks area, he's probably not a constitutionalist. Am I correct in assuming that?
I would think so. Based off the fact, because I wrote a letter to him directly myself, and I got no response. At the time, again, I'm still going through the process. Everything I am doing is pro se. It is so I don't necessarily have it. It's kind of a learn as you go type thing.
Right.
Looking back, I wish I may have actually taken. I wish I could have actually should have actually taken the sheriff to court on this. I really wish I did. It's kind of late at this point for me to do that, but the point being, I think what is going on with this, and I think what Representative Koppleman was trying to say was that what 922, 18 USC 922 cites is that they basically regulate possession. They do not necessarily regulate confiscation. And that is my challenge. Was my challenge in the Supreme Court as a facial challenge was that the North Dakota Century Code 1407-01024G is confiscation. And somehow they challenged this basically, and I'm going to say this, they took Phil Axe, the Solicitor General's amicus brief is what they call it, and they picked it up and they read it to the letter. The Supreme Court failed to look at the actual case. They never looked at it because they looked at me as a pro se and they looked at this and they did not care.
Go figure. Go figure.
I'll figure on that one.
So, that's why I said I figured he probably was not a constitutional sheriff. And of course.
And I can tell you Haley Wamstad's not either. And I'm more than happy to call her out on this podcast because I would love to hear her explanation. So,
you probably won't get one. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I pulled off so I make sure I have a stable signal here. But what I was saying about that federal rule is that it's a triggering rule. So it's a rule that hinges upon a triggering event in the state. So if the state says you lose your firearm rights, then that rule says you can't have them under federal law either. But if that is rescinded, then you've lost your triggering event, at which point I don't think that rule holds any water. And that's one thing that I might research on this. I might actually reach out to that state's attorney and find out what the triggering event is on a rule or a ruling from the state that no longer exists.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of where I was at too when I was reading on that, Ben, and it kind of I guess I came to the same conclusion you did, and I think we probably need to clear that up and see why it went down the way it did probably.
One thing I'd like to know, and I'll ask this of Derrick. See, Derrick, I know your name.
Thanks. I see this is going to be a running joke for the whole podcast.
After 2 years of them, doing this, and now, thinking that they're not going to answer your emails. They're not going to answer your letters to them, the sheriff that is. I have a question. Maybe you need to have the judge who cleared you of this and said that you can have your guns back, have the sheriff show proof that those guns still exist in their property.
Yeah.
Because I got to tell you, I'm a little conspiracy theory when it comes to that, but I sometimes think that some of our law enforcement officers, especially our non-constitutional sheriffs out there, are a little shifty. And so maybe we need to check to make sure that those guns are still in their possession.
I would love to see if they are. And kind of tying all this together, we can make this case even more crazy. Is one, North Dakota Century Code actually does allow for restoration of firearms, right? 621020.1. All right, that whole Century Code, it allows felons to have their rights restored. So that kind of gets into what Representative Koppleman was saying about triggering events. The felons can get it, but why can't people with protection orders who just had their rights restored? Nope, doesn't matter. It's still restriction. But kind of getting into the sheriff, these firearms were not actually taken from my home. They were not turned in by me. They were turned in by a third party.
Right.
So if you really want to throw this for a loop, these guns were already removed from the house. by somebody. I'm trying to avoid some
Oh,
names.
no, that's
but,
understandable.
But they were removed to a neutral third party's home and then confiscated from that home. So
Right.
if 922 G8's goal is separation, why were they still taken by the sheriff to begin with? That would be my question.
Yeah. What grounds did the sheriff have to take possession of those? Because that can be a legal slippery slope for a sheriff as well. If they have to be responsible for those guns, if they came into possession of them from a third party and said these belong to Derrick, not David, and then the question is, why would a sheriff want to have possession of those guns? I mean, it's one thing if they just said, we're going to keep an eye on you, Derrick, and if we see that you have your guns back when you shouldn't, we're going to step in. But it doesn't make sense to me why they would do that from a third party. I know a lot of the sheriffs I talk to, I mean, they would be very, very reluctant to receive a gun from somebody, and if they did, they'd be looking for the rightful owner or some way to not have that in their possession longer than they had to.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's I mean, I wish I knew the sheriff better. And like I said at the time, going through this, I mean, I've never been in trouble in my life. I mean, I am not your. I mean, I've got a great life, and I've had great people who have made sure that I'm on the right path, and that is not, and to say for this sheriff and this county sheriff to tell me that I cannot have my guns back when I literally have a court order saying so, just because some state's attorney thinks this isn't how it works. And I would like to know where the state's attorney gets that authority, because I mean, I can trace this all the way back to basic high school. Last I knew, state's attorneys don't have that kind of authority. That's a judge's authority. And the judge allowed me to get my guns back.
Yeah, well, the last 4 years, that's been a little bit different, hasn't it? It's the attorneys saying that the governor was able to write laws, and now one of them's running for a judge. My bigger issue with what you guys are talking about here, we've been talking a lot about Century Code, we've been talking a lot about U.S. Code, but what we're forgetting about is constitutional issues. Everybody refers to 2A, but actually the North Dakota Constitution is stronger than the U.S. Constitution. So Article 1, Section 1 is your right to bear arms underneath the North Dakota Constitution. Where we run into this is Article 1, Section 25, which is Marcy's Law, which we've seen being abused time and time again. So what Marcy's Law in certain cases has been doing is, instead of you're innocent until proven guilty, it kind of reverses those in situations such as yours, where you have that restraining order. You have to prove your innocence. But sections A, B, and C kind of really go into the right to reasonably be protected from the accused and any person acting on behalf of the accused, the right to have the safety and welfare of the victim and the victim's family considered when setting bail or making release decisions. So when you run into a restraining order or false restraining order issue, I'm surprised, honestly, that they didn't refer back to that, which is just as bad as the U.S. Code. Obviously, they'll keep finding loopholes for you, so you're going to need a judge that's going to treat this fairly tip to toe. So just 2 cents to look at it, because I mean, Century Code is one thing, but when you get into the Constitution, that's not exactly something even our legislators can change. That has to go back to a vote of the people. And that makes this a rough situation too, because once we get past the initial hurdles of fixing the Century Code, getting rid of these loopholes that are being used against you, you still have a constitutional fight on your hands too.
Yeah, and the constitutional fight is never, and it's not even, and I would even expand the constitutional fight getting into the other part of this of divorce and father's rights. And I know this doesn't necessarily focus on this podcast, but divorce is the main reason what drove all this stuff. And the divorce and the father's rights part is, it's the same thing. If you're not the plaintiff in a divorce case, you are guilty until proven innocent. And a lot of times I think it's standardized that usually the woman files first, because the man is the one trying to just fix everything. And then that's just the natural dynamic of men, and trying to make sure that hey, I built this. I'm still trying to build it. It may be broken, but I want to fix it. But and then getting in, also pulling that into child support and even motions of contempt. I would even borderline on that. Getting into things that are, because when you get a motion of contempt filed and the judge shows an order to show cause. That order to show cause basically says you have to prove why you're not in contempt. That's not innocent until proven guilty. Not even remotely close. So I think the court systems in North Dakota, and I would even expand broadly beyond that, and I would say that the court systems are generally rigged towards plaintiffs. Now I know there's a very small case of women that probably are guilty and innocent until proven guilty, whatever. But I do think in divorce and family court and specifically civil law, it is rigged against defendants in general.
Well, I can tell you
even
just a little bit. I have had experience with this with buddies and friends of mine, and even family members. Is that I didn't see it in North Dakota. I thought it was in North Dakota, but I know like in South Dakota, as soon as a divorce is filed, whether it's by the lady or by the man, there's a temporary protection order put into place on both of those people, and it's just as bad there. And not every sheriff enforces it, but they do, I guess, go and try to take your firearm. I always, when someone calls me, I like make sure every firearm you have is someplace else. If this happens, make sure of it. And you're right, Derrick, that a lot of times it seems like the ladies will file. And everything I've seen, including all the way down to my sister's divorces, she seemed like she got a lot of preference. And I'll be honest, I thought she was in the wrong and should have lost the kids. But they went to her because the court always leans. They also, and she turned around and she filed a protection order other than what the state of Wyoming at that time had on her, well, it would have been her husband and became ex-husband. And I mean, that court went after him and destroyed him out there in Gillette. And a lot of things that happened there. Yeah, I mean, he had his issues, but I don't think he got a fair play at all in it.
Well, they
and
exasperated
it seems like I hear that a lot.
They exasperated it by going against him because they made him guilty before proven anything else. So I mean, it goes to that point, and I think Marvin was going to say something there a second ago, or it was either Shiloh, but yeah, it's just it's an unfair rigged system.
Yeah, jump in there, Shiloh, if you had something.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of piggybacking off what you guys have said. I've had friends and family too go through divorces, and that's exactly my thought too. Is it isn't right on what happens a lot of times, and obviously every case is different. So, but
yeah,
it's just.
I'll throw this comment up here. Keith O'Donnell jumped in here, and Keith's a good friend of mine. He's an Iraq war veteran, actually injured over there, and we can go down that whole road some other day. But he's like, preach it, brother. He goes, dads get screwed. And I can tell you, Keith went through a horrible divorce.
Yeah.
Where we saw some of this and some of these things we're talking about that have happened. So, I mean, there's probably some things to look at legislatively there as far as to what can happen within divorce cases. Ben will probably have to jump in on something like that. But I'm not real familiar with North Dakota's divorce laws. I guess I should probably get more of that.
So
way.
I mean, one of the biggest factors that kind of like getting into the main topic of DVPO and guns. Okay, you take your DVPO, you get a restraining order put against you, and then you get your guns taken away. Well, then that factors into that drives the whole thing of the divorce.
I'm going to interrupt you quick. Why don't you explain to everybody what that is, because not everybody's familiar with that.
The DVPO.
Yes.
Explain what the DVPO.
Correct.
Yeah, the domestic violence protection order, which is which was what we were alluding to before. And basically, they are a civil protection order that is placed on you. You don't get a trial by jury to get this against you. You don't get it's a civil case, and based on preponderance of the evidence, which is just slightly above 50%, then you get a protection order and you lose your guns. Those things drive the divorce when that happens. They are those are the factors that will make it specifically. And I would like to get in not trying to stray away from the gun side of things, but this also factors into custody. And custody is really the biggest thing. Custody of the children, custody of everything. Specifically, the North Dakota's best interest factors of the child, which are how they determine who gets custody. And specifically, one of those is factor I, that specifically states any finding of domestic violence. And if you lose that factor, your whole case is done. So these DDPOs are incentivized at this point.
Yeah, and we were talking about that. Well, I'm going to jump in here. So we've got a couple people that are chiming in here. One comes over for Rumble, so I just placed it in our own chat area. And guys, I don't have the overlay on tonight because we got so many people on here. And I know who this is. He says, I dealt with this myself a few years back. You always have to be leery of red flag laws, and that's very true. Forget about fathers' rights. There's an entire industry built around subverting those, definitely in North Dakota. And I know that you and I, Derrick, talked a little bit about this, especially with the incentivization as to what basically the kickbacks is what I call them. And it does create, even though we don't have a red flag law in the state of North Dakota, this creates a red flag law because they could come in, you have to prove yourself innocent, and they assume you're guilty and treat you like a criminal. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and that's driven around Title 4D is what it's called, which basically is and there's also Title 4E, but basically Title 4D and Title 4E are what the federal government says that a state has to have a child support program, and those effectively are what incentivizes courts to maximize child support, because under Title 4D, the states get a kickback on that, and it's 63 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar of child support that North Dakota collects, they're getting 63 cents on the dollar. The question would be, I think that would be asked, was where does that money go? Well, that money goes to the Judicial Retirement Fund. So now you have an incentivized jury to maximize child support and bring about the most money they can. And the maximum number is 25%. Anything at 25% is going to be maximum child support. So now you have an incentivized jury because, I know I want to retire, but that's how we're going to get paid at retirement.
Right.
Yeah. So one question comes in here, and I'm guessing this is for you, Derrick. What else in the protection order business is held up as far as your rights? Is it the divorce issue, restraining order, or just a gun issue for the state's attorney?
All the above would be my answer. It would be all the above. This restraining order has, the biggest things is my rights to parent. That has been held against me. It's held over me. It's still being held over me. It's constant, and it almost is a script at this point where no, he has a protection order. He's a bad father. Well, let's not forget the kids are not part of the protection order. But so why should that be held over me?
Yep.
Right. Kids are not part of the protection order. I mean, they were initially, but the opposing party agreed to drop them off. So let's talk about fear. Let's talk about that fear is the only thing that a court needs to drive this. Yep. And the Supreme Court, in their opinion in this case, basically said that, well, in order to have a protection order, if it's already there to extend it, you don't need to have a new finding of fact. You just basically say, I'm still scared.
Wow.
I'd like to see that in the North Dakota Century Code where it says that. As for guns and the state's attorney, that's another issue. I mean, it's all the above. Everything about this protection order has been held over my head, and it's a false protection order. And I will say that very, very bluntly. And I've gotten, if anybody wants to ask, I will put the case in front of you.
All right. Well, I'm gonna hold that right there. We got to take a quick break and thank some of our sponsors, and we'll come back, Derrick, and we'll join in on this. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back here with essentially what I call a de facto red flag law, but as Derrick says, it just flat out is. Stay tuned with us here.
Located at 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Give them a call at 701-258-6308.
The team of mechanics at Lauer Auto can take care of any problem your vehicle is having. And when you do business with Lauer, you can be assured you're doing business with a pro Second Amendment America First repair shop. There are plenty of other auto repair shops in the Bismarck, Mandan area. But why take a chance at patronizing a shop that might not have your beliefs at heart? Make no mistake. Make no mistake, Lauer Auto is your pro Second Amendment repair shop. When you talk to the guys at Lauer Auto, don't forget to tell them that you heard they are a sponsor of Guns and the 701 and that you appreciate their support of our pro Second Amendment, pro North Dakota live stream and podcast. That's Lauer Auto Repair, 701-258-6308. 701-258-6308. Located 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Exhilaration of power in your hands at Bloodline Kinetics. Why Cerakote? Simply, it aids in firearm preservation while also giving your piece a unique look. Barrel threading, NFA laser engraving, bolt handle threading, mount, level, and bore, sight scope chamber rebarreling, and much more. Bloodline Kinetics is meant to reflect a long American lineage in gun ownership, who stand for the Second Amendment rights, Bloodline, and the science behind gun accuracy, Kinetics. To some, it's just a constitutional right that can go away. To us, it's in our American bloodline, and we believe it should stay that way. Here at Bloodline Kinetics, we understand that hunters, sportsmen, women, and gun owners should have a quality firearm. Stop and see us at 2008 Morrison Avenue 2 in Bismarck, North Dakota, 58504, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 701-390-7997. Visit our website, bloodlinekinetics.com.
All right. Oop. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry, I had a little mic problem there. So we left off
here.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Marv.
I'll let you come in, but then I have a quick question for Derrick here.
No, go for it, Marvin. I'm good.
Okay, so with the protection order issue, I've actually seen where there's been a false protection order put into place, claims of stalking on the father. When it came to court, and keep in mind I'm not an attorney, so when it came to court, the father was actually able to come in, provide proof that it was the exact opposite situation. There was probably 83 voice messages that were played, proof of phone records showing that everything that was being said was actually the other way around. And the judge at that point was willing to dismiss the protection order completely just because burden of proof was presented. But the father was actually able to flip the protection order around so that it was in place for him because he no longer wanted to have that contact. So I know you said that your judge has already gone through, they've amended this protection order, which is causing all these issues. But at what point do we go back to the initial judge and be like, okay, this is where we are at. The order that you approved is what's causing this, because the judge's job is the interpretation of the law. The sheriff's is strictly execution, not interpretation. So there's a judicial misstep that should no longer involve a state's attorney. This should be back to a civil proceeding, correct?
Correct. And I actually did that. And I did that twice. First thing I did was I filed a writ of mandamus from the judge to command the sheriff. It got denied. I filed a motion to vacate, which is what led to my Supreme Court, and that got denied. That was, and then they actually called that one frivolous, even though I was able to cite, hey, your order isn't working. And the judge even specifically stated on the stand, well, if you have problems, then you can file with the court. And then I was told, well, this is a frivolous suit. So I with this specific case of how poorly it was handled, right now it's difficult for me to go back to the judge because the judge is retired. So, I mean, which is, kind of in hindsight, I think that brings something into play. It's easier to keep it than it is to get rid of it. So I don't really know at this point. I think my options are kind of exhausted and I have to let the protection order expire because of the timeline that's left on that protection order. So, really the key is getting everybody involved so that we happen again to somebody else. I am not fighting this for me anymore.
And Derrick, that's coming up in May, right?
Father, I'm fighting for my gun rights, but it's for the next guy.
And that's coming up in May, right?
May. It's supposedly going to be expired in May. Yes.
Yeah.
Now I realize that you and your ex-wife now, of course, are separated. But so you said that she has said that she releases you from the protection order and everything else, correct? So, I mean, you even got her, as much as you guys are separated now, you even got her pretty much on your side in some aspects.
No, I would definitely don't have her on my side.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to put it that way, but
like I said, what happened was what I was getting into was there was an agreement to allow for firearms returns. Okay,
right.
That was the agreement. Because personally, I don't care. I don't want to see you. You don't even live in the same state here anymore. That another factor in this that ought to draw some people's minds. My point was just give me my guns back. I don't want to see you anyways. Let me live my life. And that is the problem. And that was where we got an agreement. Yeah, take your guns back. No big deal. But yet they're still sitting in the sheriff's office because of what we discussed prior to this.
Yeah, the only other, I know that I helped a guy out when I was still with the NRA, and that was over in Belfield. And I forget what county that is. Shiloh, what county is that over there by Belfield? That's not Stark.
Billings.
Billings County. And
Yeah.
that sheriff was not friendly at all to the Second Amendment and did the same thing, took the guns and kept the guns. We did finally get his back, but it took a lot of effort, and I got NRA Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund involved in that one. And like I said, you and I talked about that, Derrick. But
yep, absolutely.
I think they got. Look, sounds like to me after visiting with them, they got a lot of battles going on right now. So, and yours is coming at the end, so that's probably why they're probably not going to do anything at this point. But I sure wish they'd have got involved earlier. But
yeah,
Ben, we got you back online. Have you caught any of this? And do you have anything to add to this?
Well, I think I just lost video for most of it. I heard the audio piece of it, and I think the question. I understand that Derrick doesn't want to have this happen to someone else. The question is, what's the path forward? How do we make that happen? And I think we have to examine the use of a federal rule, possibly not even possibly not even a law, but a rule to essentially supersede the court system in North Dakota. I think that's a big problem. The state's attorney is hired to deal with state law, state issues, prosecute state law breakers, and not to sidestep state law when it's convenient, when the federal law does what that person would prefer. And so I need to dig into that and kind of get my own feel for that. I mean, I believe everything Derrick is saying, but try to understand their perspective, even if I don't agree with it. Right. Because understanding those that are against you are key.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. If you don't understand where they're coming from, it's hard to mount a defense against them. It's just that simple. So yeah.
One of the problems with and Ben will probably know this as well, is when you try changing laws like this, when you try changing statutes like this, you end up with that whole blowback against you that you're against protecting victims and you're protecting women. And that's the stuff they always throw out at you when this is going on. And it's not the case in this situation. And I bet you it's not the case in some. Now, in most, probably, but not in this situation. And with that in mind, I mean, you've got to think, they've got to go case by case, doing blankets over everybody on this stuff. And I wish that we could probably get some of the constitutional sheriffs in North Dakota to write a letter to that thinking about the attorney, the state's attorney, and say, you know what, the proper thing on this now, the court has said X, is that you should release those guns back to him. And that should be the standard. And so maybe it's one of those things where, like you said, Derrick, it needs to be bigger than you. And maybe we need to see about kind of a grassroots on that and say, you know, it needs to be a blanket policy.
Mm-hmm. And I would fully agree on the policy level. I mean, really, if you actually dig into North Dakota Century Code 1407, 701, which is the code that regulates the domestic violence protection orders, there's a lot of other stuff. I think one of the, if this is just my personal opinion, and hopefully that this gets heard, is that what needs to happen with these protection orders is there needs to be a higher standard of proof. For one, you cannot convict. This is a civil conviction, is what it is, and this is everything that the Bill of Rights ever was against. It is a backdoor deal to convict you. And what happens is when you're convicted this way, you don't get a jury trial. You don't get the right to an attorney. You barely get the right to remain silent, because if you remain silent, well, there's a protection order anyways, because it's preponderance of the evidence. I would be borderline pushing this to, one, make the whole thing, rewrite the whole law to say something to the effect of, we need a jury trial for these protection orders. Maybe not necessarily beyond a reasonable doubt, but definitely at a minimum clear and convincing evidence. And,
Right.
that would be how it needs to be worded in the bill to get the judges to actually see this. Because even if you have clear and convincing evidence, if there's criminal charges in a case where they have domestic violence, and in my, they're gonna need to protect that criminal case, and that's from a legal standpoint, because it's either, well, we could throw it all out there at the DVPO, but then there's that anything you say can and will be used against you.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're still screwed. So I'm going to take my Fifth Amendment right to protect my criminal case. Well, you still got the protection order, and you're still convicted. And and then even if you don't get convicted in the criminal trial, it's nothing. It means nothing, because you still are convicted. Yeah, sure, maybe you're not behind bars, but you can't have your gun rights. Say you in a case where there's somebody who lives in the same county, if they may get you kicked out of your house, which is that you own. I mean, I'd like to see where that's constitutional. It goes so much further beyond gun rights, and gun rights is the main focus of this case, but it's the whole entire Constitution in these things that are getting, I would say, getting stepped on. Because you're not, yes, you have a hearing, okay, but is it really due process to lose constitutional rights when you don't have a jury trial, when you are not judged by 12?
Well,
that would be the question to ask.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was just, to build on what he just said, I don't see what taking gun rights away really has to do with someone's feelings where they feel threatened by somebody else. I mean,
Yep.
If you had even preponderance of the evidence, if the preponderance had to be that you're a threat to use a firearm, that might be even that burden might be okay, because they'd have to have some demonstration that you've made threats with a firearm before, or you've assaulted somebody, or done something with the use of a firearm to say, and this is why we think they'll do it again, or why they'll use that as something to get back at somebody else. The other question is the no contact order or the restraining order, is it of any value? Is it worth the paper it's printed on if you're worried about what somebody has in their possession for a weapon at home? Because if the order actually keeps two people apart, then who cares if they have weapons, because they're not together. And so it really doesn't show much faith in the protection order process if they also need to take someone's guns.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, because I think we all know that criminals are going to do what they want to do anyways, and they're not going to care if a piece of paper says no.
Well, and one of our commenters on here, and I know who he is, and he said, then you just buy guns where all the criminals buy guns. You don't have to give up your guns just because of silly law. Well, he makes a great point, though, there.
He does.
Just because they did this to you, criminals are still criminals, but you're not a criminal.
Right.
So what is, like Ben said, what is the objective here? In all reality, what was the objective here? Because you're not a criminal. You did nothing wrong. Yeah, we got issues.
I can tell you what the objective is. The objective is leverage in the divorce. And
Absolutely.
And it is scripted. Like if you were to go back and pull other court cases, specifically mine or other ones, you will see that lawyers around the state are using protection orders to gain leverage in the divorce case, and it is scripted, because everything if they get a protection order, they do not have to argue the case. They don't. Right. It is a script, and he has a protection order. This finding of fact is the way it needs to be, and that's the other portion of this is the divorce. The divorce is the why protection order happened. So even if there was, you could even tie this into another situation of, say there isn't a divorce, there's still leverage somewhere. It's leverage, it's control, and I'll even go as far as say it's manipulation.
Manipulation, and they want to instill fear. And I don't, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this because I've dealt with this in 2 different states, Wyoming and South Dakota. Not my own personal stuff, but friends and family. And it is strictly to put fear into mostly the man, the husband, and the woman can make any accusation they want without any evidence, and they're going to just boom clamp down on him. And that's to put fear into that husband to submit. And that's exactly what that is. And that's what's happening over here in Rumble in the comments too. Creed's Corner is glad to have you on there, and he says you're 100% spot on. He talked about how too many sheriffs don't understand their actual duties, which is true, and that the Supreme Court, you'll have to go to it. I told him you already went, and well, that was a loss at the Supreme Court. So that probably goes back to what Marvin was talking about. We need to get back to what the North Dakota Constitution says about Second Amendment rights, and then that's just reinforced by what happens at the U.S. Constitution. But none of them do it, and they don't care unless you have the money and the will or the knowledge. It's hard to fight it. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
So just a couple things. I know I've been kind of quiet so far, but just a couple things. And we talk about this quite a bit on our show. Let's start with the sheriffs. I don't know that there's too many constitutional sheriffs in this state. I could maybe think of 3. I think that's what we came up with when we had Dr. Frank here and we were talking about sheriffs that would stand up for our rights as far as the elections are concerned when we were trying to get them involved. Because a lot of them think that they answer to the state's attorney. I mean, we've had...
Which they don't.
Correct. They don't. But a lot of them think that they answer to the state's attorney. When we were going around the state doing these town halls and different things, there was a few of them that the Sons of Liberty had up by north of Minot and stuff, and their response to all this was they had to check with the state's attorney. And when you do talk to your local officials, that's usually the first thing out of their mouth. So the second thing that I've been thinking about since listening to all of this is are we sure that they even have the guns, or did they destroy them? Are you going to get them back? Yeah, or whatever the case may be.
Again, if you think these concerns haven't been on my mind, they have.
Yeah.
Because what the law says is they're there for safekeeping. If I find out that they destroyed my guns, they're going to be in for a world of hurting, and I will put that out online because I will put them into court so fast because the law says for safekeeping. Okay.
How many guns are we talking about? Just out of curiosity.
At least 10. At least 10 guns. A lot of them family heirlooms. Yeah, really, and that's the saddest part is they were passed down guns. I think that maybe out of the 10, there was 4 that I bought myself. So and a lot of them are very old guns. And if I find out, I will take them back to court for that.
Well, yeah, you got like Grandpa's service revolver. You got all that stuff. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's it's something. All right, and this case is, this case is something. That's all I can say is I've seen a lot in my 37 years. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Nonetheless, live it.
Yeah.
Well, and what Shiloh was saying here earlier actually brought up a point that I've been discussing with other people too. We have the Attorney General's office. We have the governor's office. We have all these elected offices where this responsibility can move up to a statewide figurehead. And half joking, half serious, we've been talking about it for a while with a couple different people, is why do we not have a statewide elected sheriff? Like the top sheriff for the state, where these smaller, where our counties, that sheriff can communicate with somebody sitting in the Capitol, because again, your sheriff is your most powerful form of law. So why don't we have one figurehead that can walk over to the AG's office, one figurehead that can walk over to the Secretary of State's office and be able to get faster responses? Because it seems anytime a lot of people have told me this, like they get a hold of their sheriff and they'll say, we'll look into it. And you never hear a
Something
response. And it's something that we've been talking about. We don't know if we go after a constitutional amendment for it, but like, even if you go back to the elections, why are sheriffs not transporting the election ballots, the election material, the election machines? So your sheriff, and it's frustrating with Grand Forks because I've heard this time and time again up that direction. It seems like the state's attorney rules the land, and they don't. Their job is interpretation and protection of that county. It's not to tie you up in litigation, spend all your money. And the other thing that I've had an issue with while you've been talking here is it sounds like your ex has left the state. Did they take the child with them, or take your children with them?
Yeah, sadly, that gets into another whole dynamic.
And that's ugly because North Dakota is one of the hardest states to move a child from.
Yep.
Like in the case of divorce.
And in this case, like to get into that, this didn't even happen in the final divorce. This happened in the interim hearing, which is basically your temporary thing. This is okay. Well, this is the pre-agreement, so y'all can just settle down, and then we'll go to trial later. And this happened well in advance. And basically, the Judge McCarthy,
she moved the kids out of state before it was finalized.
It was finalized, a permanent decision on a temporary order. Yeah, that was. And that fight, I will say that fight is still ongoing. That will never, that won't stop for a long time, I don't think.
Yeah.
The concept of the sheriff thing is interesting to me, Marvin. It really is. Of course, it'd have to be an elected position.
100% elected.
Which would be interesting to see how that goes. And I've always contended that you want to take care of what's happening with our elections in the one aspect. That's a big rabbit hole. But I do think that partially that is a constitutional change to get our districts back to where they're based on population, and then have a set number in the Senate, which will give them less power out east, which will help in our elections overall. But that's a whole other concept. As far as the sheriff electing a statewide sheriff, might be an interesting concept. But yeah, it'd have to be elected, and we definitely have to have it so maybe it's like an electoral college when you elect them, so that we don't have all that power in Fargo and West Fargo, Grand Forks and Minot electing our statewide sheriff, which would be disastrous.
Well, and here's the other thing we've been talking about, Clayton. I don't know if you've caught it. I brought it up multiple times just because we deal with gerrymandering of the legislative districts. Why don't we move it to the way we're represented in DC, where each county has their 3 elected officials? You can fluctuate based on population. After every 30,000 that a population increases, you add 1 more House representative to represent that area. So, like, this has all been ongoing conversations where we've had, because constantly we see we see these lines redrawn where they're right up to legislators' driveways, where they're moving one legislator from one district to another. We just had that court case lost up for gerrymandering up on Newtown, the 4A, 4B with Terry up there. So.
Well, look what happened in District 8, Marvin.
Yeah.
Those lines were specifically drawn to pit basically who the governor didn't care for at the time, and pit them against each other. But South Dakota already has this. The House of Representatives of South Dakota is based on population, and the senators are a set. I think it's 2 senators per district, and it does not change. So you've got that bicameral, you've got that House of the People, and then you've got your Senate, where things are going to be more stable with an equal voice for each and every single district. I can't tell you how much I love that idea. I've been talking about that for a long time.
And that's the big thing here, Derrick. Like, you have many uphill battles that you're dealing with, and from somebody that's gone through this personally, I feel for you, man.
It's
you don't want to get me going on divorce law, because I lived that dream back in 2002.
I would love to have you get going on divorce law, because any way you can say something else
No,
other than what
that's how
this
we
spring
have
and
hour and a
I'd be
half
all
shows.
for it. So.
Yeah, that's how we have hour and a half shows.
That's how we have
Well-
hour and a half shows.
We got a lot of guys. Let's tell you. Let's go to a few of these comments because they've been rolling
Let's do
in.
it.
And of course, Vance, he's from Georgia. He says the communist government will use any backdoor to take guns. I believe that, whether it's federal, state, county, we're seeing it everywhere. I do believe that. Phyllis Lewis, she chimed in here. She says, there has yet to be an answer that's solid that I've ever found when person A has Second Amendment rights suspended or forfeited. Person B that resides with person A, why, if true, is person B's rights also taken? It's a good question, I guess. I'm telling you right now, I've seen this. I've relived it, not myself as far as going through divorce. I've lived it with family members and friends who have been faced with this in other states. It's not a lot different. You're assumed guilty, not innocent. They come in and they use these orders to basically red flag you. That's what it is. It's a red flag law without having it on the books. And it's a direct violation of the Second Amendment. If you don't have something that is on the books that retains to it, then the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution should be the default place you go and say, nope, this is not. And honestly, I can see an avenue with the new Bruin decision with historical use. I really could see an avenue at a federal level or challenging it in the federal court saying, wait a second, there is no historical use for these protection orders to infringe on the
that's
Second
already
Amendment.
there. I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's already there.
Okay.
922 G8 is actually being challenged by Rahimi versus, or United States versus Rahimi, which came out of the Fifth Circuit Court. Basically, just to give you some background about that case, in the Fifth Circuit, they heard the case, and on a rehearing, they said, no, 922 G8 is unconstitutional. Just to give you an idea how much the government cares about this law, once they got that ruling that say, no, 922 G8 is unconstitutional, they filed a 2-week waiver to get this into the United States Supreme Court. Because there's a requirement where you have to wait 2 weeks and then you can file. They filed a waiver. They were granted their waiver. And then, with that case, they argued that back on November 7th. There still hasn't been a ruling on that yet. But if you're anywhere into court and you're into firearms rights, I highly recommend you listen to this because Elizabeth Prelogger argued a very good case. Not saying I agree. I'm just saying she did very well versus Matt Wright, Rahimi's attorney, where it seemed like the court was very skeptical about overturning this law. And really where the bigger problem is this will be a further, if the Supreme Court decides to rule in favor of the United States, you are going to have a bigger expansion of gun control, because now it's basically going to be on the state to determine what the people are, because that's what they were arguing. And under the historical context of Bruin, I still fail to see the historical context. And at some point where we got to draw a line where that historical context is to stop. And my answer is it stopped at the Constitution, so but they're arguing all the way back into English common law and stuff like, this is the derivative of here and here. And it doesn't make any sense. But the way the Supreme Court acted, I do think you're going to see, if I had to speculate, probably 2 swing over to the other side, and it's gonna flip it. I do think Bruin may get flipped. Sadly,
I don't think it'll get flipped. I really don't think it'll get flipped. You're going to have every group, including my former employer, the NRA, is going to be fighting against that happening. But I do believe it'll be challenged because it sets such a precedent. Someone over Rumble, they actually chimed in on this, and they said that the argument that you're referring to, Derrick, the Second Amendment allows the government to disarm dangerous individuals, that is, those who would pose a serious risk of harm to themselves or others if allowed to possess a firearm, which is kind of like talking in circles for the government. But that's, I'm betting that's what that case is about, yes.
But again, the power defers to the states. Article 1, Section 1 of North Dakota circumvents
it does.
Entire argument right there.
On that issue, as far as the Second Amendment, that is the rule nationwide. It can't be challenged. It shouldn't be.
Well, and I saw today that Tennessee voted to allow there to be teachers allowed the guns in school to protect the students. And of course, the outpouring of outrage from the left was pretty abundant there. The news, of course, following that more than following the case. We've been talking about different things to do. Is it the SHIELD program from the NRA, Clay? Is that what it's called?
School
the
SHIELD,
program?
yeah.
Yep. School SHIELD. I mean, we've been working on different plans for years. All right. So we have come up with plans, but that's the difference on the compromise on the left and the right. We've come up with plans. Well, since we came up with them, they don't want them.
Not just
and
that,
that's
Mike,
how it comes.
we funded
and that's how
it.
it boils down to.
Like
Mike.
School SHIELD, we funded it completely, and nobody in South Dakota or North Dakota took advantage of it.
Right.
And it was because it was done by us, the NRA, at that time, even though it was the foundation. Yeah.
So if they pass this for the teachers, did they at least allow silencers for the librarians?
No, there's a good one.
Suppressors for the librarians. Love it. And boom, Marvin comes with the comic relief. So we did have another comment from Rumble. The question is a restraining order enough to establish that someone is in fact dangerous? And that's always been the question. That's why it's unconstitutional the way they apply these things. And actually, Ben, are you still with us?
I am.
So what do you think of that? In that particular thing, is a restraining order actually enough to establish that someone is dangerous?
Well, if the bar is to take away their constitutional rights, I would say no. If the idea of a restraining order is to keep two people apart, that's what it should be focused on. And if they're so dangerous that you have to take some extraordinary steps above that, you better take them to court and find a way to throw them in jail. But otherwise, the whole idea is keeping two people apart. And so why don't we focus on that and a reasonable way to do that, as opposed to how much other pain can we put that individual that's being restrained in while keeping them apart? And that's the piece that I think is sort of silly with a lot of this. Now, we know that we got Marcy's Law, and when that came in, a lot of people had no clue what it was going to be. If we're ever going to change that, and you're right what you said earlier, Marvin, that it would have to be the people that change that. Legislators can put a proposal in front of the people, but the people have to vote on it. And if we were going to do that, I think that proposal would almost have to be, repeal that section of Marcy's Law and replace it with X, and then try to find some way to put some more rational thought behind what's there. But our own Attorney General has come up with some kind of backdoor red flag ideas that he's been pushing. We defeated one last session and that also had some mandatory minimum stuff hidden in there. But we've got to guard against, I think the legislature is one of the most dangerous places right now to if we don't catch these things. Can we put legislation if we're proactive, to sort out the difference between keeping two people apart and taking away constitutional rights? I think we can, but we've got to go at it head on. We can't nibble around the edges.
Well, and Ben, I do believe that you're going to see more red flag stuff this session, especially with what's been going on. And it isn't the first time. I think it was 2 sessions ago when Wardner and Baszler and the whole crew there, they were on board with red flag law, including our governor. And, of course, Rick Becker and a bunch of us fought pretty hard to defeat that and won. But this is going to keep coming back. I believe it's going to, and I'm sure you believe that too, don't you?
Well, I do, and it's going to be key that we elect leadership in our legislative branches for this next session that's going to do that. Whether, and we've got to see, who do we want to be our leaders? Are we going to continue with some of the leaders we have? Or are we going to get new leaders? But I think whoever we have, the Second Amendment needs to be out front as something that we don't compromise on, that we're not going to go backwards on. They didn't have any ifs in the text of the Second Amendment. And or only if, and I think I when I look back at the founding of our country, I didn't see them wasting words or missing words. And so that's what we got to focus on. But if it's sort of like a kind of a sideline thing for some of our leaders, and we're more worried about funding for this, that, or the other thing, then I think we're that's not what we should be focused on. And I really hope that we put legislators in the body this year that are strong Second Amendment legislators so that we can support leaders that are strong Second Amendment leaders. And then maybe we can be proactive on some of this stuff, even more than we've been able to be.
Oh, absolutely.
So Ben, I have one quick question here. When it comes to the protection orders, because obviously not everybody's innocent when these things get put into place. Why don't we look at focusing and removing it from a civil proceeding to actually putting some teeth behind it, like 12.117, which is simple assault, or you have 12.117, which is 07, which is harassment. Like, if this person has legitimate fear that they're going to be harmed, we should have a police report filed. We should have reason, and until the court hears on it, we should have monitoring instead of just using it as a civil proceeding to remove.
What Marv, I think, says on there is at each when different ones trigger at different levels, then of course we react differently. So triggering effects need to be put in there.
But and that's the thing is, like, with protection orders, I mean, a Class B misdemeanor pulls a gun, correct? A Class C, you're fine. A Class
There's
B
triggering
pulls
events
a
there.
gun. Yep.
As to what they're charged with. Yeah.
I don't know if all B misdemeanors do. If domestic violence or isn't involved, or if there's not, there might be some
failure to
misdemeanors
register your vehicle.
I don't think all. I don't believe misdemeanors do in cases outside of domestic violence, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, because I mean,
but anyway, I can actually
really
chime in on that a little bit. Actually, there's another.
Tell you what, guys, I want to hold that. Let's come back. We need to take another break because we've actually run long. So let's take one more. Let's take a break here, and then we'll come back to that. And Derrick, you go ahead and respond to that. Okay.
Sure.
Lauer Auto Repair, located at 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Give them a call at 701-258-6308.
The team of mechanics at Lauer Auto can take care of any problem your vehicle is having. And when you do business with Lauer, you can be assured you're doing business with a pro Second Amendment America First repair shop. There are plenty of other auto repair shops in the Bismarck, Mandan area. But why take a chance at patronizing a shop that might not have your beliefs at heart? Make no mistake. Lauer Auto is your pro Second Amendment repair shop. When you talk to the guys at Lauer Auto, don't forget to tell them that you heard they are a sponsor of Guns and the 701 and that you appreciate their support of our pro Second Amendment, pro North Dakota live stream and podcast. That's Lauer Auto Repair, 701-258-6308.
701-258-6308.
Located 309 South Washington Street in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Experience the exhilaration of power in your hands at Bloodline Kinetics. Why Cerakote? Simply, it aids in firearm preservation while also giving your piece a unique look. Barrel threading, NFA laser engraving, bolt handle threading, mount, level, and bore, sight scope chamber, rebarreling, and much more. Bloodline Kinetics is meant to reflect a long American lineage in gun ownership, who stand for the Second Amendment rights, Bloodline, and the science behind gun accuracy, Kinetics. To some, it's just a constitutional right that can go away. To us, it's in our American bloodline, and we believe it should stay that way. Here at Bloodline Kinetics, we understand that hunters, sportsmen, women, and gun owners should have a quality firearm. Stop and see us at 2008 Morrison Avenue 2 in Bismarck, North Dakota, 58504, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Call 701-390-7997. Visit our website, bloodlinekinetics.com.
It's every American's right to bear arms. At Mandan Sporting Goods, we're here to help you support your Second Amendment rights, which reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Whether you're looking for a pistol for personal defense or collector gun, we have the staff to help you. We also have the area's largest inventory of ammo and reloading supplies.
Mandan Sporting Goods, the area's local gun and ammo specialists.
All right, then we are back. A little quick break there. Hopefully everybody took advantage of it. So Derrick, go ahead. We'll go jump right back into this. Oh, we lost
audio.
we lost audio, Derrick.
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
Bump the button. So
okay.
what I was saying before your sponsor break there, there is another type of restraining order, and it's called the disorderly conduct restraining order. And it really what the difference between the two is the threshold. Like whereas domestic violence has protection order has to involve an intimate partner, a disorderly conduct restraining order can basically be anybody. And what's the key to both of those? They can take your guns and they're both of them.
Yeah. So, but where I'm getting at is like, why do we have that civil one hanging out there? I mean, it's up to legislators to make the laws. So did we put this on the books so that we have this civil one? Where is that buried in century code? You know, like if it's that serious, like if you're scared somebody's going to hurt you. And I've seen people, I have friends who have had their SO walk straight through that piece of paper. So like I've seen the ugly side of this. So don't think I'm against it.
Yep.
But why do we have a civil proceeding for it? Why? Because I mean, the sheriff delivers it, do they not? Or the city police?
Yeah, no, the sheriff delivers them to you. Yeah, they deliver you your temporary order, which also gets your guns taken away too. Can also get your guns taken away too. So they deliver your temporary order, and then 14 days after that, you're required to have a hearing. So they run these through in 14 days. That is not enough time to prepare. That is not enough time that's barely enough time to get an attorney. There's a lot of things that happen because because whoever's filing this has the jump on you, and it's the same process with the disorderly conduct restraining orders. So it goes back into control and leverage. And when you're running it through in 14 days, you don't have time. You absolutely do not have time to prepare to gather up because half the time you're excluded from your house during that temporary restraining order. So even before you go to court, you are already guilty. You're excluded from your home. You still can't have contact. Half the time you can't even talk to your kids at that point. And this is before you even go to trial.
Well, I think we need to have a higher burden on at least parts of this process. And I think to Marvin's point, you know, if we're going to allow this guns to be taken away through the process of a civil separation, then we need to put it on the judge that if he wants to go down that road and have that be part of his order, that he has to jump through over some high hurdles. And maybe those high hurdles involve the opportunity to have a trial in front of a jury of your peers instead of a bench trial for that portion. Maybe it requires a higher evidentiary burden to hit. But I think that can be done without actually having to replace what we have. Now, it would replace be better, maybe, but sometimes I have to look at what's the possible, not the ideal. But
I'd prefer rewritten, tuned up, whatever versus replace. Because, I mean, we have a good basis on a lot of our laws. It's just over the years they've been manipulated to a point where they need to be addressed.
And it may not necessarily. And again, I mean, the law. I fully agree with the manipulation of laws, and a lot of the manipulation of laws has come from the court, specifically in Supreme Court rulings, where they make up arbitrary rules, like specifically in this case where they talk about protection orders, and they don't, and where they specifically said in the opinion that, well, you don't have to have a new finding of fact to extend a protection order. I'm sorry, but extending the protection order wasn't ever in play. Like that wasn't even any discussion. Why is the Supreme Court making a ruling on that? But now it's cited and now it's law. So now it effectively is law, and that's bypassing legislators. And you can't.
Yeah, now they set precedents.
All right.
Well, I think it's like what Clay said is that it was a back way. Well, through what Ben said. It's a way through Megan's law. It's a way of going backdoor and doing red flag laws without actually having them in place. And I think it's when all these laws I think Vance, who's usually on the show, says we've got like 22,000 federal gun laws out there
over
across
that.
the United States,
Uh,
and and they don't follow any of them unless they want to. They basically pick and choose, and they use them against us. And they do. They use them against the people that aren't doing things wrong, or who they want to punish, or it gets to be a bit ridiculous.
Well,
Hey,
look at
Clay,
the
will you
judges.
put that?
What's that? Go ahead.
Will you put that comment back up from Eric?
From Eric
I'd
Newman?
just like to comment on that, Eric
yeah.
Newman. If marriage vows were taken more serious, so we
There
talked a
would be
little bit about
divorce.
this as well. So, big picture, as I've been listening to all of this, and I've felt this way for a while. A lot of this has to do with taking, and I know this is kind of a rabbit hole, and I'm probably going to get some heat, but oh well. Here we go. A lot of this is about weakening the family, taking the men out of the family, and weakening the male as a whole. And
Well, it's weakening the head of household.
yeah, and we're making a mockery of that. And I mean, look at the way our society has gone with the institution of marriage. Now, we've got divorce proceedings, and we've been discussing this all night about how messed up that can be. And I'm not saying that there aren't certain situations, but for the most part, I mean, we've made a mockery out of marriage as a whole in society. And
Well, absolutely. And that started, and this is another, like you said, the rabbit hole here, and we'll just kind of drift just briefly here. But like I always told people, this is when the whole gay marriage thing was still supposed to be starting, right? And I
Yep.
flat out told people, listen, marriage was created in the church. It's in front of God. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's created in the eyes of God. So keep your government out of my church. If you want to go to a courthouse and do whatever they let you do by man's laws, fine. But it has no place. But that ain't what that was about. They wanted to make us accept it, try to make us run down that, make us start marrying people like that because of what you said, Shiloh. They wanted to destroy that family unit and the sanctity of marriage, as well as having a head of household and a family structure as we know it as Christians. And that is probably the root of a lot of this. And here we are.
If you think of it, I mean, it started way back when they first actually, and again, this is down a rabbit hole, but it started when they put the TV in the household and just kind of gradually went from there. So, yeah, in my mind, this is a part of the bigger picture of splitting up families. I mean, we've had a guest on before that has called us the drop-off generation. When you have your kids, pretty soon you're dropping them off at preschool or daycare, and then it just goes from there to you don't see them until they're 18, and then you send them to college. No wonder that society is the way that it is. And so I don't know, I feel that a lot of this is just the way that our society has gone too on weakening the family. Because you listen to Derrick's story, I mean, there's been a lot of people even on our show in the last year or so that we've had. I mean, we talk about these issues, and even in our country today, I mean, with people not being engaged, it's kind of just keeps cycling.
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely. When God left the mainstream for a lot of people, that's where we ended up. History was repeating itself, and it has since time began. We see it when nations fall and societies fall. It can happen, and it's usually a result of people straying from the Word. Absolutely. Gene Cox, you're gonna put. Well,
there you go. You go for
it. So Jerry Reed said she got the gold mine and I got the shaft. Well, I think that's what happened to Derrick up there, and probably several other guys.
It's not just me. I mean, and I know that. I mean, specific. I mean, I've you don't understand it until you go through it, and that's really the honest truth. I mean, I have had family members to go through it, but and you're kind of like, well, that's not my business. But then you realize maybe it should have been my business. And I mean, I've seen it with a lot of people at work, and where they've had to go through it, and you're like, okay, not my business, just want to remain neutral. But at the same time, now that I'm going through it, I look back and I wish I got involved, because you look back and you see the things that were happening. It's the same thing. And it's usually the dad that gets screwed over. I have seen some exceptions. My aunt was an exception. She was the one that got screwed over too. I mean, it isn't just men, but will say the strong majority is men. And I've seen it so many times.
Look what just happened in New York, guys. You get a judge like that. Did you guys hear about that story where the judge told the person who was arrested he was making his own firearms at home, which is not illegal? He said, "Don't bring the Second Amendment into my courtroom. It doesn't exist here." Well, that's the Second Amendment. But what else does that judge think that doesn't exist here? And that's a judge. That judge should be disbarred. Should be gone.
And that judge should be up on judicial charges herself, because that goes and flouts right there to the Bill of Rights and everything that our country stands on. So it makes no sense that she hasn't come back and at least tried to apologize about it, because I mean that's what you should do. Decent people, when you know you've made a mistake, is say that you've made it wrong. Because technically, if it doesn't exist, then how many other laws do you not think exist? And should all those cases that you've tried over the years be looked at once again and revisited, because your opinion apparently is biased toward?
No, probably.
But I think that judge meant it is the problem.
I think that judge absolutely meant it. And Ben, going back to what you said about the founding, our founders, they were Christian men. It was founded in the Word. And of course, people want to say that didn't happen. 2, most people were illiterate back then. Think about that. The majority of the people didn't know how to read and write. Some did. So they made it as plain English and as more understandable than they could ever imagine. Everybody was supposed to be able to understand it.
So the common man could read it and interpret it or understand it.
Yeah, understand the rights they had. There's nothing to be written into it. There's nothing to be interpreted into it. I get pissed off when I hear the Supreme Court saying, "Well, we're going to interpretate the law or the Constitution." No, your job's to interpretate the laws that were passed from the branch of the legislators and see if it's constitutional and upholds the Constitution. That's their job, not to interpretate the words of the Constitution.
But one of the things that we miss, well, I don't think we miss it, but I think is missed in our discussions, is we forget that the Constitution wasn't the foundation. It was the foundation for our laws and what we like to talk about. But the foundation was the biblical values, the Judeo-Christian concept. And so if you have a definition of right and wrong and you say, okay, in a world of right and wrong, here's how we're going to live as a country, it makes a lot more sense than if you read it as though you're, somebody from Mars is reading it and doesn't have any of that background. And once you separated God from society, like you said before, but more specifically, I believe God from schools. That's when it changed, because it was, that's where the secular culture took over a couple generations. It was all about taking it out of the school and replacing it with some relativity in right and wrong.
The bull jive that we got going now.
Yep, absolutely. No, I can't agree more with that. So we're getting close here to the bottom. I like to keep these at about an hour and a half. Is there anything that you want to put out there, Derrick, or anybody else before we have to sign off tonight?
First of all, I just want to thank all y'all for being here and listening to the story and giving me the opportunity to speak on this platform. I really, really want to help start fighting this, and this has got to be taken out of the hands of the court. We need more legislators like Representative Koppleman here, and we need more people like that who are willing to stand up for this stuff. I like I said, I'm very thankful for this group, and I'm very thankful for the networking I've had to get in here, and I'm definitely thankful for all y'all and listening to this. And I can't thank y'all enough for having me on here. Well,
you can thank Kit, because she's the one that told me about you.
Too. If I could give a couple of shout outs, definitely Kit Brennan. She's been a great help in all this.
Good lady.
To get me into this network, and then also Mitch Sanderson too. He's another person who I've definitely been a big help in my legal struggles. Just getting people, just this network I built. Charles Tuttle's another one. He's been a big help. And I'm just thankful for all these people who've backed me. And I know I'm missing people, but I'm just thankful for everybody who stood behind me on this. And I'm going to keep going. And definitely thank you for everybody here.
Well, we appreciate you coming on,
Our pleasure.
and I'm glad we were able to co-op with you guys, Shiloh and Marvin. Now, we ain't done that for a while. I was going to have you guys on eventually anyway, but hey,
Yeah.
it worked out. And Ben, thanks for coming on because your insight is, and I know where you stand. I don't even question it.
Well, and can you believe this? I'm actually from, the Imperial Cass County, West Fargo, where all the nonsense comes from.
Yeah.
I always joke and say the people from out where Shiloh and Marvin are from really like me better than my own. But somehow we still get by the finish line. Most elections, we got to do it again this November. So,
Well, maybe Ben, we're going to have to, we're looking at that weekend of May 8th to do what we call our 2A day with guns in the 701 at our little private range outside of Mandan. Maybe you have to put that on your calendar.
yeah, somebody send me an email. We'll see what we can do because I really want to hear where we want the 2A bills in North Dakota to go.
Well, yeah, there's a lot, and you and I can talk. We've got each other's numbers here, and we can do a little discussion. I know I've been talking with Jeff Magrum a little bit too, and there's some tweaking to do on some of the other things. Basically, constitutional carry is a big one for me, and I want it to more emulate what I accomplished in South Dakota. And we just got some tweaking to do, but we passed the bill we could pass when we got it, and that's politics.
Well, and just so you know, we did get rid of the alcohol restriction. We also got rid of the residency requirement. It took 2 swings at the apple, but now I think the key thing there is, is there more we need to do? I think the one outlying thing that I hear is the require to notify law enforcement if approached. That's the one that they don't like. I don't know if there's many other flaws that people have pointed out to me.
I want to see it. I want to see it just like South Dakota and Wyoming's, where anybody, you don't have to be a resident of this state because your rights shouldn't end at a state line.
I'm not sure you do have to be a resident now. Do you after the last tweak? We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll have to talk. I think it still maybe does, but let's talk and see if it's fixed. That's great. But yeah, they having to tell an officer, that's none of their business. And you got to remember, I hail from South Dakota, so I helped with a lot of that stuff when I was down there. And we really emulated what Wyoming was doing, which Wyoming has some pretty good laws for protection of the 2A. So.
Well, we've got a study that we're in the middle of in the Judiciary Committee in the interim, and it came out of my Bruin bill, which was basically trying to kind of measure all of our laws against the Bruin decision.
Oh, good.
And the way that they kind of sidelined that, and it was partially sidelined by, shocker, a former sheriff. That wasn't the Constitution. Yeah. And
way to tie it together,
Yeah.
Now, isn't he up for election this year?
He is. And I'll let him remain nameless, but it won't be hard for the viewers to figure out. But and I don't have anything against the individual. It's just it was put into a study to basically put it in a pigeonhole. What I'm working on in the interim, but I don't have a lot of help with this, is trying to actually put some bill ideas into that study and see where they go. And really, one of the ideas is if we're going to have a kind of a Bruin intended outcome for our laws, maybe we need to, if we're going to allow some level of restriction, because I think that's the only way you get it past the finish line, then you say, okay, what's the scariest places for people to be armed? And I think the first thing you do is say anywhere that people can normally go without somebody unlocking a door for them or escorting them into there should be fair game. Now, you don't get to the back part of the police station without an escort. You don't just walk through and go. But you might get to in the lobby so you can report a crime. So up until that door, anybody should be able to be armed. It's the public square, essentially.
Well,
and so I'm trying to figure out how to tie that in, because right now we restrict all government owned and operated buildings.
Yeah,
and that's just way too broad.
And also another one is there's a little piece in there, but it has to do with public gatherings. And I fought with at that time it was Stenjum on public gatherings and being armed. Now we used to do Friends of NRA events. You probably heard of them. Some were quite large in the state. They kept saying we couldn't carry because it was a public gathering. And I took it, we got our lawyers involved. I wish we'd have went to court on it so we could have set precedent, but we basically argued and we won it, I guess, or at that time Stenjum dropped it. But we said, no, this is a paid event open to the public. It is not a public, basically gathering in the sense of public.
We got those removed, though. So when I came into office, there was about 6 things that defined a public gathering. Political events were one. We got rid of that.
See, and that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be on there.
No, and we took out. So I think I can't remember in the last rewrite if we got rid of the term public gathering, but it's defined very narrowly now, and it talks about publicly owned or operated buildings, and it talks about I believe high school sporting events or school sporting events, and there's a couple other items, but it's fairly narrow. A few more of those could go away, but
right.
Let's say we're at 95% now. So
good. I also have another idea, especially in light of what's happening with gun-free zone challenges. And I know the Montana case had a little setback, but it's still got a good premise, and I know they're going to still run with it out there. And that's that Metcalf case. If that goes all the way and I know it's going to probably end up in the Supreme Court eventually on a Bruin decision, most likely. So my question is do we try to pass legislation now that says if that is overturned and gun-free zones go away, then that triggers, just like our abortion bill, triggers the fact that then schools are no longer gun-free. And that's just an idea I had.
But I believe under state law, we can already get rid of that. I don't think we need. I mean, the challenge is. Well, the challenge is the schools have historical precedence? That's what you'd have to make the case on if you're going to allow it to be upheld under Bruin's context.
Well, a lot of schools had kids, they brought their rifles with them to school.
Well, right, hanging on the gun rack in the back of the pickup.
Well, I'm talking even when it's settled out here. It was a one-room schoolhouse, a country rural one, and they took there, and then they probably hunted rabbits on the way home. Heck, my own grandfather talked about that up here in North Lemon, and when that was kind of common, and they'd hunt all the way back home walking.
Well, one other, I believe we also fixed the law. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it looked like I was frozen for a sec. I think we also fixed the law in terms of schools, where we limited it now to within school buildings. It used to be tried to be school grounds, and then there was an exception but it doesn't apply to your car or something if you're on the school grounds, that sort of thing. Well, I think we've limited it now to the buildings. So at least when you drop your kid off to be indoctrinated at school, you can you stay armed. You don't have to park across the street and escort them to the door.
Well, Ben, now we just got to fix, just like they mentioned earlier, the registration when you fail to register your car, and we all know about Luke's issue there.
And Ben, we were talking a couple weeks ago about Colorado trying to tweak their laws and everything, where there was basically it was going to be where even if you had a gun in your vehicle legally, and you were transporting it and you passed in front of a school or court or whatever else, of course, you were so many feet close to them, that was going to count as they could have reason to pull you over because you had an NRA sticker on the back of your car or something like that. And any reason to pull you over. And they were saying, well, since you're in that zone, you're breaking the law. So that's what they were trying to push over there in Colorado. So it's those little laws they're trying to tweak left and right in every state that are trying to infringe upon us.
Well, and don't get this wrong. I mean, we did not get rid of school grounds, which essentially by extension removed what you're talking about. That didn't happen by itself, and the liberals out there that are anti-gun did not want it to happen. I think in some of the times we've made changes that they maybe aren't real on the ball on. They don't realize that we just improved. I like to use the word restored more of people's rights that are infringed. But I'll tell you that even the stand your ground bill that we got through. Number one, I'd never called it a stand your ground bill at least not that I know of in public.
Well,
it was no duty to retreat, and Magrum got a wild eyed over on the right, and I did the thing on the other side, and they were already looking right, and we got it.
You realize I was working with Magrum on the other side over there, and he called me up one night. He goes, "Hey Clay," he says, "Ben wants to do something here." He says he doesn't like the name of it, and he wants to kill the bill. And then he told me what was going on. I said, "Then kill the bill. Let's get the one we can pass." And I know Jeff was up in a little. He was excited, but we got it through. And I actually went and testified. I don't remember if you were in the room there when we were testifying on that, but I'll tell you what, I was so happy to see that get through. And I couldn't believe the Catholic Church lobbyist was up there lobbying against it. I kind of got him afterwards and kind of embarrassed him pretty hard. But anyway,
Well,
Yeah.
you know what? You know what? I know a funny story. I tried to. I did several iterations of allowing guns in churches, and right
Mhm.
now it's still an opt-in, and I would like it to be an opt-out if we're
Yeah.
if we're gonna further change that. But
Right.
the way he killed my idea, or at least partially neutered the idea, narrowed it down a bit, was from a Catholic perspective. He talked about how asking if you had an opt out and then the church had to put some sticker in the door or whatever that said you can't carry here, that somehow would defile the door because the doors are sacred. After all, Martin Luther nailed his grievances to a Catholic church door.
Yes, he
And I'm
did.
like,
Yes, he did.
oh my gosh, did the Catholic lobbyists just use Martin Luther as the reason to not have guns in churches?
That's
I mean,
funny,
wow.
isn't it? Oh my goodness.
But
Yeah.
I'm actually a good friend of his, but we just don't agree on that issue. So
I flat out afterwards. Luke was sitting there. I walked over to him, introduced myself, and we talked. I was like, I said, you got, and he did. He read some great scriptural passages, which I was familiar with, which had no relevance, and he was trying to use it to circumvent, not in the case in the context he was putting them through.
Mhm.
And I flat out told him, I said, all the morals and things you're preaching, I said, I'm not against. But I said, maybe you ought to fix your own problem with your priests in your church before you start dictating whether I need to retreat and have a duty to. And I said it loud enough to everybody there. Everybody's like, Luke, I thought Luke was going to spit his drink out because he was like, I can't believe you just.
Well, I've said the same
that
thing.
went around the whole Capitol that day, but oh well.
I said the same thing to a few around here. We get a lot of people that want to, get up in the city council and whatnot and
Yep.
preach about whatever is going to be, within 500 feet of a church and this and that. And I'm like, when you start paying some taxes, then I'll care what you say. But until then, you got no skin in the game. And I know that irks some people, but for me, it's like, we've got priests and nuns and all that stuff around here that don't pay in anything, and but they all got an opinion, but they don't pay in anything. They don't pay for our roads. They don't pay for this, and I get a little sick of it. So I'm one of those people that likes to kind of I guess you would say chastise them a little bit when they get up to speak. Yeah.
Well, anybody else got any final comments? As we're gonna wrap her up here pretty quick. If you got anything, anything you got coming up on your shows there, Shiloh?
We're still brainstorming on some things. What do you got, Marvin? I know you were going to talk about the leadership deal, right?
Yeah, April 27th. That's this Saturday. They have that leadership conference. That's going to be at New Song Church. AG Wrigley's going to be there. Senator Kramer. There's going to be a host of people there going to be speaking all day long. So we have that going on. I know we are coming into the summer slowdown, which goes back to conversations we had earlier. We have 18 years with our kids, so I know we have stuff coming up there. But other than that, I mean, my big thing for people right now, focus on the June primary. That's your local government's elections. You need to know who your candidates are. You need to reach out to them because your mayors, your city councils, this is their only election. They don't move to November. Other projects that we have working is right now I'm putting together our own cheater copy of the Century Code. So when the next session rolls around, I can just apply the bills on the fly and we can see what they're really trying to do. Right. And we'll have that all up in public and live for you folks too. So
sounds good. I know Mike and we got Mitchell in the morning every Friday morning there at 5:50 a.m. We'll be visiting with Todd, and we got some interesting subjects. I think we're going to change some of them, Mike. I know we had a whole show.
I know there's a bunch of stuff that came out in the last day, so yeah,
absolutely.
We got a bunch of change.
There's a couple of minutes. I definitely want to address that judge in New York while we're on the show, and a couple other things. So we're gonna. And by the way, Arizona. Everyone who's been following this with us, the Arizona gentleman that was basically arrested. He had his trial because he shot an illegal alien on his property. It went to a mistrial, so we'll take it. It's a little win, but it could come back. But that did end in a mistrial, so he is free as of right now, and we'll update you on that on Friday. And then we got like I said, there's been a lot of things been changing, so we're going to change the whole show that we had planned. But tune in 8:15 Central, 7:15 Mountain on KFYR 5:50 a.m. with Mitchell in the morning, and that'll be our next show. And of course, every Wednesday night right here at 6:00 p.m. Mountain, 7:00 Central. And when do you guys usually air, Shiloh?
We're on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock Central, and Friday nights as well at 8 o'clock Central. But as Marvin was saying, we are going to cut back to one show a week, and that will still continue to be the Tuesday night show.
Okay, so Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Central. Here's the Deal podcast can be found pretty much everywhere, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
YouTube,
Facebook, Rumble, Twitch. We're out there. We have our own webpage too.
So we are now on Twitch. It was working tonight. We had our one listener, and we had a second one that I had to ban because he was getting kind of crazy over there.
I saw that.
We're on Rumble. We are on, of course, Facebook and CommiTube. Just think pretty much everywhere, along with our website, gunsandthe701.com, although you can't comment from there, but we did have listeners on there tonight. And then, of course, over on X, Elon Musk.
Real quick before we go here, Clay, Donna Magram posted on our side of it through Facebook. She says, Clay, it looks like you may need some guns.
That goes without saying.
Well, I got a sampling behind me. I should show you the rest of the room. Tell Donna to say hi to Jeff for me, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we're simulcasting, so she'll hear you.
All right. Ben, again, thank you. Appreciate you coming on. And hopefully now I see the sun is setting, so hopefully you'll make it to Sioux Falls before it gets dark.
No. But I'll be driving for a while.
Okay. And Derrick, again, thanks for sharing your story. We're going to probably have you on again, especially after that order goes off, because I want to see if you get your guns back. And if not,
I'll be more than happy to anytime you want.
Maybe some of us can help you out on that. I don't know, but let's see what happens after that order expires. So,
yes, sir.
And Mike,
I'm more than happy. Anytime you just give me a call. We're ready to rock and roll here.
All right. Well, appreciate Mike. Stay on afterwards because I want to visit
you
with you a little bit. So. All right, everybody. What's that?
Take care.
Where was I going to go?
Where would you go? Yeah. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll see everybody on Friday morning at KFYR 550 Mitchell in the morning, and again on Wednesday. Thanks again for tuning in, and hopefully you learned something. Talk to you all later.